Hey guys, Chris here with theGoodOldGamer. So we're just mere hours away from the Zen 2 Ryzen 3000 launch, as well as AMD's RX 5700 series with their Navi GPUs. Now, yesterday we got news that AMD will be lowering the prices of the RX 5700 series. Now, we can debate till we're blue in the face whether or not this was planned or whether this is in response to Nvidia's Super GPUs that just came out. Regardless, in this video where I covered that news, I got a lot of comments saying that these price drops, they're not enough. People are basically expecting these to be Polaris replacements, which they're not. And then people think that these are Vega replacements, and they're really not. What these are is these are GPUs that are coming out. They're kind of their own thing, that they're their own architecture. But a lot of people don't understand how to quantify if these GPUs are going to be good price to performance. As we've seen, reviewers out there are praising the new RTX supercards as being great price for performance, and I'm going to prove to you here today definitively that that is untrue. And I'm also going to speculate a little bit. We'll find out tomorrow if true, but I believe the new pricing on the Navi cards might actually fit within traditional price to performance gains that we're used to seeing. So that's what we're going to be talking about here today. What price to performance gains are we, or should we be expecting each and every single generation? Alrighty, so looking back historically over the past several generations, and we're going to look at this here in just a minute, but just want to go over the basics with you guys. Typically, the new GPUs in the mainstream category, that's the 199 to 249, essentially the X60 class GPUs. Because Nvidia's naming scheme has been consistent, we're just going to use Nvidia's naming schemes here, because using AMD's would just get way too confusing. And these would normally perform equal to the previous generation's lower high-end GPUs, somewhere between the $299 and $399 price point. That would be the X70 class. So essentially, the previous generation's X70 now becomes the new generation's X60 class GPU at about half the price. Now, the lower high-end market on new GPUs, that's the $299 to $399 market, and this is what we're seeing both AMD and Nvidia really focusing on right now, typically classified as the X70 class GPU, is usually equal to the best GPU from the previous generation, the best gaming class GPU, which usually is between $599 and $699, which is an X80 Ti class GPU. So for $400 each generation, you should be expecting the previous generation's X80 Ti level of performance, the best from the previous generation. Now, to show you guys that this is the case, I'm jumping on over here to Tech Power Up, so Steve Walton's review of the GTX 660. And if we take a look, we can see that the GTX 660, which is, the $200 class GPU, is roughly on par with the GTX 570, the previous generation X70 class GPU. You can go through all the benchmarks. They will swap places from time to time, but overall comes in roughly on par with the 570. And if you go through the benchmarks, you can see the previous generation's 580 class, which back then there was no Ti. This was the best of the best that Nvidia could produce, is actually being beaten handedly by the GTX 670. Now, once again, they will swap places and become a little closer from time to time, but overall, roughly similar performance. Moving to the next generation, which is the GTX 900 series, as the 700 series was just a refresh, the GTX 960 review. So we can go in here and you can see that the GTX 960 compares very favorably to the GTX 770. Now, you can compare it to a 770 or 670, depending on how you want to classify it, because the 770 is really a 680 overclocked, so it's a little bit strange, but even still, it's usually going to be behind the 770, but will trade blows with the 670. Either way, it's still in line with what we've seen before and what I just showed you guys. And then taking a look at the GTX 970 class GPU, it is competing with the GTX 780 Ti class. So we went from a $700 GPU, now at $330, delivering similar performance. And then moving on to the GeForce GTX 1060 3GB review, because that was the 199 GPU, we can see the 3GB card is about on par with the GTX 970 and AMD's 199 GPU. Yes, these were $199 if you got the 4GB model. And those perform basically on par with the 970 class GPU. Scrolling on up, we can see that the GTX 1070 competes very nicely with the 980 class GPU. And once again, you guys can check all the benchmarks. They will trade spots depending on which game that they are, but overall, this is typically the performance level that we saw in each new generation. So as you guys can see, that equation has held true for many generations here. The 60 class basically has 70 class performance at half-ish the price. So it comes on down between $199 and $249 from $299 to $399. And then the lower high end, which is the $299 to $399, the X70 class, will perform about on par with the previous generation's best, the absolute best. So that means a $199 GPU here today from the new generation of graphics cards from both AMD and Nvidia should perform on or about the level of a GTX 1070. So Nvidia actually does have a card at that level. The 1660 Ti 6GB card is basically on par with the GTX 1070. However, this card is selling for $279. That is a 40% price increase over where it should be. This is a $200 GPU. Every generation beforehand, that would have been the case. So that's the reason why this is a terrible buy, and nobody should be buying 1660 Ti's. Nobody should be recommending them because they're 40% more expensive than they should be. Now, between $299 and $399, Nvidia up until recently only had one GPU in this price bracket with their Turing class GPUs, and that was the RTX 2060 Super. So traditionally, we should get X80 Ti class from the previous generation performance. And if we take a look, it's nowhere near the level of a GTX 1080 Ti. And this is the reason why RTX looks so bad, because this is the performance level you should be getting in that $300 to $400 price point. Even if we take a look at the RTX 2060 Super, it's still nowhere near the performance level of the GTX 1080 Ti at $400. So that's the reason why this card is also not worth the money. However, Nvidia now does have a 70 series class card around this performance level with the 2070 Super. But this card comes in at $499. That's a solid 25% more expensive than this class of GPU typically comes in at, making the 2070 Super still a terrible value, and I can't recommend it. It performs where it should, but it's still $100 too expensive if we go by the formula that both AMD and Nvidia have followed over the past 4 or 5 generations. Now, I know what you guys are thinking, so how does this relate in the future? Well, same sort of deal. If you're not getting RTX 2080 Ti level performance at $399 next generation, if they try to charge too much more than that, I mean, a little higher is okay. You know, there is inflation and other things, but if it's more than about 10%, so if it's more than about $420, $440, you can't really excuse that by inflation. Inflation is not that big of a deal. So you should be getting 2080 Ti level performance next generation for $399. And you should also expect RTX 2070 Super performance at $199 next generation. That's the performance level that both AMD and Nvidia have hit year after year for a very long time now. And this is the reason why we consider Turing a turd, and the original prices on the Navi cards were also going to be a turd. However, things have changed. Now at $399, the 5700 XT fits nicely into this price bracket, and if it can perform similarly to the GTX 1080 Ti within a few percentage points, and in my opinion, single-digit percentage points, so 5% slower, that's okay, but not much more than that, then at $399, this card is wholly justified to be what it is. Now, we only expect this card to be about 10% slower, maybe 10, 15% at most, so that's probably the reason why it costs what it does. The performance that we're expecting out of these cards, and like I said, we'll find out for sure tomorrow, puts these well above where they should be relative to Polaris. They're both going to be much faster than the previous generation X70 class GPU, which means there's no way that they should be $199 to $249. So they're fully justified in being in this price bracket if performance is close to that X80 Ti level. Now, the 5700 non-XT is probably not getting to this point. It'll probably fall between the GTX 1080 and 1080 Ti. So that's the reason why I was saying yesterday, if they hit the $299 price point, that would be a lot better for them. Looks like they're not going to do that. They didn't have time to revamp everything. But at $349, I don't know how good of a deal that's going to be. But the XT version at $399, if it gets within a few percentage points of the 1080 Ti, absolutely will be worth $399. Since we have all the numbers for Nvidia's cards, we know where they land, we know what their prices are. Now with AMD lowering their prices, that puts the 5700 XT right in that bracket, and if the performance is there, it could actually be worth that price. So like I said, no matter what sort of weird things you got going on in your head, justifying whatever, price to performance is the best possible way to determine if a GPU is worth it. So that's my opinion on that, guys. I mean, this is proven. This has been the track record. This is the way things have gone for years. Nobody's had a problem with it up until this point. So that's my recommendation. I would go by that chart, but let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. If the 5700 XT, if it can match or get really close to a 1080 Ti at $400, are you not good with that? I mean, it's only one generation. You know, we're only one generation ahead. It's not like we're 2 or 3 ahead. You know, next generation, you should be expecting 1080 Ti for $200. But that's later on. That's not right now. But like I said, I really want to hear your guys' thoughts on this. Do you think that that would be good? That's my expectation. That's where I'm holding AMD accountable. And that's what I'm going to bring up in my video tomorrow. If they get close, if it's right about there, great. If it's not, it's going to be a really hard sell for me. But that's because I'm going to hold each individual manufacturer accountable to that chart, because that's what they set. That's the precedent both of these companies have set, and I'm going to continue to hold them to that. Well, alrighty guys, if you like this video, please hit that like button, please subscribe, please share with friends. That really does help me out. And that's all I have for today, and I will catch you guys in the next video.